Hello, friends. The 1269th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. The most tense location is the breakthrough area north of Pokrovsk. This area has not diminished. The Russians have advanced near it in Poltavka, as well as in Nikanorivka, which is located at the base of the front breakthrough east of Dobrapilya. The Russian Defense Ministry claims that it has captured both Nikanorivka and neighboring Suvorovy. This is confirmed by a Ukrainian fighter with the call sign Muchnoi. Meanwhile, the Donetsk region authorities have expanded the mandatory evacuation zone in the Dobrapilya area, near which Russian troops broke through. At the same time, the spokesman for the General Staff of Ukraine, Kovalov, said that the situation with the Russian breakthrough north of Pokrovsk is stabilizing, and Azov has been sent there. The situation in the Dobrapilya direction is stabilizing. The defense forces are taking all necessary measures to detect and destroy groups of Russian occupiers. In particular, during the actions of the 1st Corps of the National Guard of Ukraine, Azov, adjacent and subordinate units, the enemy suffers significant losses. The Ukrainian Defense Forces continue search and strike operations in their area of responsibility, said Kovalov. The Ukrainian fighter Muchnoi writes today that the pincer stretching towards Zoloty Kolodiaz remains threatening. There, the enemy is trying to gain a foothold on the heights in some places and control the approaches in order to expand its advance further into the depths. The advance is being held back, but the pace of enemy attacks from this direction is not slowing down. We continue to locally stabilize this section. Among the main problems of the section, I would like to highlight the strong pressure from the flanks, the difficult terrain that allows the Russians to hide even equipment, as well as the constantly operating artillery covering the assault groups. Our soldiers have to maneuver in order to prevent the defense from being breached and individual positions from being surrounded, writes Muchnoi. Russian telegram channels confirm the transfer of reserves of the Ukrainian armed forces to the Dobrapilya direction and Ukrainian counterattacks on the village of Zoloty Kolodiaz and from Dobrapilya through Kutusovka. It is stated that the Ukrainian armed forces have managed to recapture some of the positions on the Dobrapilya-Kramatorsk highway, where the Russians did not have time to consolidate. At the same time, the Russians claim that they are expanding their zone of control to the north and control the heights around Zoloty Kolodiaz. That is, in general, the Ukrainian armed forces have not yet been able to cut off the salient in the Dobrapilya area or completely stop the Russian advance. The coming days will show whether the Ukrainian army has enough reserves to at least stop the breakthrough. If the Russians manage to further develop the offensive in this area, this will indicate a very difficult situation with reserves for the Ukrainian army. Directly near Pokrovsk, according to both sides, fighting continues for Radinsky and the adjacent villages to the north of the city, and for Yevhenii to the southwest. In the latter village the Russians have advanced, writes a Ukrainian fighter with the call sign Muchnoi. Russian telegram channels write that the railway station has been captured in Yevhenii. There is no doubt that the goal of the attacks in this direction is to cut the route to Pavlorad west of Pokrovsk. To the north of Pokrovsk, the Russians claim to have captured the village of Krasny Liman, while the Ukrainian military says they have lost half of the village. In Radinsky itself, the Russians have managed to gain a foothold in the eastern part of the city. The contact line is gradually shifting to the high-rise buildings, where close combat is taking place. Our units are trying to hold back the advance, but the enemy is exerting strong pressure, using artillery and drones to knock out our defenses, writes a Ukrainian soldier with the call sign Muchnoi. The situation in the Pokrovsk direction is deteriorating. Given the developments, the city will be surrounded, writes a Ukrainian soldier with the call sign Shadow. Western military experts believe that the situation on the front is a losing one for Ukraine due to the unwillingness of the country's residents to fight. About 650,000 men of draft age have left Ukraine, the Telegraph writes in an article titled, "Why Divided Ukrainians Refuse to Fight for Zelensky." Millions of Ukrainians have been hiding at home for months to avoid mobilization or have bought a deferment for health reasons with a bribe. The number of deserters is also constantly growing. The number of unauthorized abandonments and losses has exceeded 200,000 people mobilized last year. According to unofficial data, more than 400 soldiers leave the battlefield every day. Because of this, the entire defense line resembles a sieve. Chaos is growing, and a stable front line as such practically does not exist, say Ukrainian military personnel. Ukraine is clearly losing the war, says Konrad Muzyka, a Polish military analyst, mainly due to a personnel crisis. The troops are exhausted by years of war, disillusioned by heavy-handed command from above, and disillusioned by those who dodge service, while Trump's perceived tilt towards Moscow has deepened the defeatist mood. The collapse in morale feeds a vicious cycle. As the ranks thin, generals cut other units to fill the front lines. Aircraft mechanics and radar operators are sent to fight in the infantry, where life expectancy is much shorter. This in turn further strengthens the resolve of the dodgers to stay away. Even for the most determined, the impetus has shifted. Total collapse is unlikely, but the danger is that defeatism will become self-fulfilling, writes the Telegraph. I think it is no secret that the lack of personnel is the main argument for Ukraine to end the war as soon as possible, before quantitative changes turn into qualitative ones and the front collapses in one or more areas. At the same time, the Russians have now begun to use a new tactic in many areas of the front: infiltration, which allows, taking advantage of the lack of troops in the Ukrainian armed forces, to send small groups to the Ukrainian rear, accumulate there and gain a foothold. The groups are accompanied by drones that provide reconnaissance and supplies. The soldiers use special camouflage equipment that allows them to at least partially avoid Ukrainian drones. Such tactics were observed in Pokrovsk, where they have not yet managed to clear the city of such groups of Russians. Telegram channels also write that it played a significant role in Russia's breakthrough to Dobrapilya. This approach is fundamentally different from how the private military company Wagner acted earlier, which was the first to use covert attacks in small groups. The difference is that Wagner attacked Ukrainian positions directly, engaging in combat. But when infiltrating, the task is to bypass Ukrainian positions and reach their rear, from where to then strike or distract the forces of the Ukrainian army. It is too early to say that such a practice will radically change the war. However, this innovation can potentially change many things on the front. Firstly, if the Ukrainian army's shortage of personnel worsens, the Russians will be able to scale up infiltration in other areas of the front, capturing territory faster. Secondly, it partially negates the idea of kill zones, today the key defensive strategy of the Ukrainian armed forces, which they want to spread across the entire front. It consists of constantly monitoring and observing the situation on the front line with the help of drones to destroy the enemy before he reaches his positions. Here I will note that the sky over Pokrovsk filled with Ukrainian drones did not prevent the Russians from penetrating the city. That is, infiltration is being introduced, among other things, as a means of overcoming drone barriers. Logically, either a sharp densification of the defensive formations of the Ukrainian armed forces or a multiple increase in the number of drone crews per square kilometer of territory will help to counter this tactic. But both tasks come up against the number of people in the Ukrainian army, which, as mentioned above, is one of its main problems.
Friends, I want to develop and strive for higher quality content, but my 2009 computer does not allow me to do this. If you have the opportunity to help me buy a new computer and make my dream come true, I will be very grateful to you. You will find the link in the description under the video and in the pinned comment. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.